everybody. It's Amy Anamkara, and today I am with Eileen McKusick. Hi, Eileen.
Hi, Amy. Good to be here. It's McKusick, like
McKusick.
music.
Oh,
Yeah.
music. Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. So I'm just gonna read a little bit of your bio, and then we'll get right into the interview. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Awesome. So Eileen is a pioneer researcher, writer, inventor, practitioner, educator, and speaker in the fields of therapeutic sound, the human biofield, and electric health. She has an MA in integrative education and has been studying the effects of sound on the human body and its electromagnetic system since 1996. She is the originator of the sound therapy method Biofield tuning, the founder of the Biofield Tuning Institute, which conducts grant funded, IRB approved, and peer reviewed studies on the human biofield, and the author of two award winning bestseller books, Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing with Vibrational Sound Therapy, and Electric Body Electric Health. Eileen has created a line of weighted tuning forks and tuning fork accessories based on her own clinical research. Recent inventions include the much loved sonic slider, which I have right here. I love it. And the uniquely effective Fibonacci pair. These forks, when paired with the patent pending circuit boot, are introducing thousands of people to the power of sound to improve our electric health. So again, hi Eileen. I'm so excited that you're here today. How are you?
I'm really good. I can't complain. My voltage is high.
Excellent. Very good. So I got really interested in your work during, I would say, probably the last 6 months. So I'm an energy practitioner. I use my hands. So I work in people's biofield using my hands. And I must have watched a video of yours and was really, really interested. I mean, I remember using forks like in fourth grade science. They teach you about, sound using the forks. And I never really thought about the impact that it could have in someone's field. So how did you learn about that?
Well, I'm self-taught. So it was all sort of by accident, exploration, discovery, curiosity, trial and error. You know, I think a lot of people end up with forks and I hear this a lot, like, I don't know what to do with them. Well, I didn't know what to do with them either, but that didn't stop me from using them, and
Right?
figuring them out. I think that I'm not afraid. I wasn't afraid to experiment and to see what I noticed. And that was back in 1996. I got my first set of forks. I had a part-time massage therapy practice, and I got a set of tuning forks for healing, and I started experimenting with them. And that was 26 years ago now. I'm still experimenting with them. I'm still playing with them. I'm still learning from them. We teach people. I ended up developing a method, which I didn't set out to do. I was just curious.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I used them, the more they taught me. And I've learned a lot, like so much that I didn't expect to learn. Really, I learned an entirely new cosmological story, which I didn't expect to learn. That completely changed my life.
Yeah, that's what I sort of understood. I mean, I read your book also, your first book, and like literally, it's like you discovered, just like you said, you discovered something really completely new. I feel like, um, gosh, I mean, how did that even? So you're working in somebody's field and you are noticing something. Like, how does that? Were you writing things down? Like, how does that all? That had to
No.
have been a lot of
Yeah, no.
clients that you were seeing.
Yeah. I never took notes. That's interesting that you asked if I was writing things down. No, I never took notes. I think that I just, originally I was just using the tuning forks over the body because that's kind of what, they came with a little tiny instruction book. It was C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and it said use C over the root chakra and D over the second. So that's what I
Okay.
do. And I would kind of move the fork, I'll take C and I kind of move it around people's root chakras over it, over their hips. And then I started discovering that sometimes I'd find spots where the fork went loud. Like I thought that it was just going to be a C. I'm going to activate the fork, I'm going to hold it over your body. It's going to sound like a C. Except it didn't. It sounded like in this spot, it sounded like C sharp. And in this side, it started like C flat.
Mhm.
This was like C full of static, or this was C and the volume disappeared so quickly. Like, why do I keep activating, putting it there, and whoop, the sound just disappears, right? So it behaved not in the way that I thought that it would behave. And so, I remember working with the chakras, holding the fork over the chakra, and sometimes it would sound really quiet over the chakra, but it would sound, if I was working the heart, but it would sound really loud over here. And I discovered that I could use the tuning fork kind of like a magnet. And then I invented this little technique I called click, drag, and drop, where I'd kind of stick the fork in the loud spot and then drag it to the midline, to the chakra. And it would feel like it got like sucked in, and then it wouldn't be loud over here anymore. It would be loud here. And people would say, wow, I feel more centered. So I just developed this little technique of going through each of the chakras, finding the loud spots and migrating them to the middle of the body. And that's just what I did. And I did this for years as a hobby. Because when I started doing it in Connecticut in 1996,
I'm in Connecticut.
yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
probably not much better in Connecticut than it
No, it's
was in 1996. But there was a lot of like skeptical and cynical dismissiveness, that kind of
not. Mhm.
thing, which none of us really likes to be on the receiving end of.
Right.
And I wasn't really interested in being a healer. I'm not really a healer. I'm more of a scientist. And so for years I had a practice, but I never thought of it as my healing practice. I thought of it as like my research practice,
Mhm.
because I was always learning something. So for years, for like 10 years, all I did was work over the body on a few people a week. That was it. It was just part-time. I was actually in the restaurant business and then in the specialty food business, and that was my main gig, was food. Uh, but then one day I accidentally discovered a loud spot on somebody out here in their field, very much by accident. And, I would move the fork through the area. I was actually walking back to the table. I'd moved away from the table, and for whatever reason, I activated the fork like 6 feet away, and I was walking towards her with an activated fork. And then, I went through the spot and it got loud, and then I came out the other side and it got quiet. And I was like, wow, there's a loud spot over there. Like, that's really strange. And this particular woman was complaining that she had a sense of pain and pulling in her jaw and her neck and down into her shoulder. And so when I found the loud spot, I wasn't really sure what to do with it, but I've been taking them all to the midline. So I just stuck a fork in it, and a vibrating fork produces a weak electromagnetic charge. So what I'm moving is the body's electrical system,
Mhm.
our electromagnetic current. And so we're able to actually do this magnetic manipulation of the field through the fact that a vibrating tuning fork produces a weak electromagnet. It becomes like a magnet or a magnetic stylus. And so I dragged the loud spot to the center of her neck, and it really felt like it got sucked in. It's such a like whoosh kind of feeling. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but she called me the next day and she was like, Eileen, all this pain and pulling is gone. And she'd been on many different providers, acupuncture, chiropractic, massage. She had really been running the gamut, and nobody had helped her. So that was really intriguing to me. I was like, well, what else is going on around the body? And I just started to explore. So everybody that came in, I'd start about as much room as I could in my room, and I started making discoveries. So I discovered that there was a membrane, that there was an actual boundary of the field, right? Because when we think about auras or human energy fields, a lot of depiction of auras show the seven bodies that kind of go from gross to fine as you move away from the body. So there's a sense that it kind of fades out. So I was really surprised to discover that it was actually like a bubble and that it had a membrane. It took me a while to figure out what was going on with that. And then I started to realize, I mean, it really took years for what I call the Biofield anatomy map to reveal itself. It was sort of like I was teaching myself sonic braille. Like there was a whole territory and language and landscape there that as the tuning forks moved slowly through it, they were almost like an invisible ink decoder, and they made it audible and texturable. And I started to come to see that what I was coming across, because if I combed slowly through, I would end up hitting places where there was resistance, where it felt like, the magnetic binding was so strong that I couldn't move through it. I mean, of course, you can override that. You're just moving a tuning fork through the air. But if you're tuned into that level of sensitivity, you get stuck and you can feel that there's something frozen or stuck there. What I started to realize was that I was coming across memories. And the way that I discovered the whole field, like I can't really take credit for it because what ended up sort of kicking in and informing me was something that I already had a relationship with. I started traveling around the world by myself when I was 17. And so I'm well tuned into my inner guidance system. But there's a structure called the Alta Major Chakra. It's a minor energy center in it, and it's right where the atlas bone is, so where the spine
Mhm.
joins the skull. But I didn't know that it was a chakra. I called it my mail slot, MAIL slot,
Mhm.
kind of like in a door. And what would happen is I'd be working and I would hit a zone that was dissonant, and I would get like little post-it notes would drop in my mail slot, and they'd say something like sadness, age 13. And I'd be like, okay. So I'd say to the person, something really sad happened when you were 13. And they would say, yes, that's when my grandmother died and we were really close and my mom never wanted to talk about it and da da. And this whole story would come out, this whole memory would appear. And so that's the way that I mapped the field, was getting into these particular distortions and then having a mail drop that would tell me what it was. And so I started to discover that anything that related to gestation, I found in that outer boundary. To birth was just inside the boundary. And it was sort of like dropping a needle on an album and reading the vibrational record of somebody's life. So that if somebody was 60, I'd find the field, most people's field extends about 6 feet around them. I would find memories that were generated when they were 30 about 3 feet away from them. So just like hair, as it grows, it moves away from us. As we experience the vibrational reality of our inner workings, that's all being laid down in standing waves in the magnetic field around our body. So in this model, your body is actually inside your mind instead of the other way around. And that our biography becomes our biology, because any place where we've had multiple difficult inputs that have been difficult to digest, that starts to inform the order, structure, and function of our physiology. For example, if somebody has had a tremendous amount of sadness and grief and loss, and they haven't been able to digest it and process it, they'll very often start to end up with left shoulder issues. Because every time we feel sad, or any iteration of the emotion of sadness, that waveform gets recorded in the field off the left shoulder. And so all as I moved, and it was pattern recognition really, where I started to see like person after person. I'm like, wow, I found sad stories off the left shoulder in that person and that person and that person. And I'm like, wow, I think that that's where they live. And I found stories about anger off the right side of the solar plexus. Well, that relates to the liver. We know in Chinese medicine that
Right.
anger relates to the liver, and that's what I'm finding there. And it took maybe 4 or 5 years for the whole map to come into view. I discovered what I call the ancestral rivers, the mother and father zones,
Mhm.
the edge of the adrenal field, like all of these different features. Not only features, but also a language. The vibration of emotions is the same from person to person. So how when you feel sad, you're giving off the same shape waveform when I feel sad. So it's really the same from person to person. And just like all of your digestive organs are kind of in the same place as mine, it's the same with our biofield anatomy. It's consistent from person to person. So what this does is it gives us a way to actually go through your memories and find memories that are still charged or that are like, were really bad inputs and there's just a lot of distortion. Just like memories never go away, the vibrational input and our vibrational response to it never goes away. And so people have had a lot of trauma, it's very difficult to keep yourself in a regulated state because you have so much history of dysregulation that's constantly informing you subconsciously. So this is a way to go in and find that subconscious old dysregulation. The tuning forks are diagnostic in that they help us find those areas. They'll initially resonate with whatever distortion is present. That's how we diagnose or hear the story, or even just discover where the issue is. Any place where there's an issue in the field, there's a corresponding issue in the body, usually something that's in some kind of tension or contraction. And so when the body hears itself, it's like looking in the mirror. Like if you haven't looked in the mirror in a little while and your hair is all a mess and you've got a poppy seed in your teeth, right? The first thing you do is you put yourself in order.
Mhm.
And our body does the same thing. When it has a reflection of itself as dissonant, as off key, as out of tune, it will immediately use that input. So the tuning fork becomes like a tone generator, like a metronome that the body can help find its pitch and its rhythm against. And once that happens, the body relaxes, the field relaxes, and whatever was stuck in the field is now willing to move. The body releases and you take kind of a big breath and you just feel more relaxed and lighter. So different emotions have different frequency signatures. There's a handful that are pretty easy to recognize that people learn going through training or in the early part of their practice. But really every pathology also makes a very unique signal that you can hear in the overtones and undertones. And again, from the mail slot perspective, I've been able to pretty much diagnose almost anything that I've come across because a knowing just comes in. For example, if somebody has arthritis in one joint and not in the other, the sound coming off the one with arthritis is going to sound and feel grainy, whereas the healthy joint isn't going to have that grainy texture in it. If I bounce sound off your liver and listen to your liver and you have fatty liver, that's going to sound really different than a healthy liver, because everything that is in motion makes waves, and waves propagate, and those waves have the information of that motion. So just like a good mechanic can get into your car and go, oh, that thunka 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 that you brought this in for is your left rear CV boot, right? You didn't know that, but he knows those sounds and what they mean. It's the same with your body. If your body has a flat tire in there somewhere, something's not working properly, it's going to give off distorted waves. And this is something that they've even discovered all the way down to a cellular level, that there is a practice called cell sonotology or something like that, where they actually are able to listen to how a cancer cell sounds versus a healthy sound of a
Wow.
right? So a cancerous cell isn't healthy. It's not correct, and so it's going to give off this distorted atonal vibe. Whereas anything that's working properly is just going to sound normal. You're not going to pick up any distortions. So it's really a way of just helping the body to tune itself. It's really that simple, that we're self-tuning instruments. We're designed to be in harmony, and that when you reflect back to the body the very specific areas where it's out of tune, it will use that feedback to tune itself, which usually involves relaxation. And really what I've come to see, I like to boil things down to their really simplest essence. And I think that the one thing that gets between us and us being expanded into our full potential, because we all know in our hearts and souls what our own potential is. And it's usually something that's pretty great. That can be a little hard to admit when you glimpse your own greatness and you know what your potential is. And yet, why do so few of us actually achieve our potential? And
That's
the
a great
reason,
question.
yeah, is because it's locked down. Every time your alcoholic father yelled at you and you went into cringe, you are adding layers and layers and layers of restriction and contraction into your body, which restricts flow. And then you end up with inflammation in certain areas and deficits in others, and things get off rhythm. And it's all a consequence of tension. And as we start to systemically like release subconscious tension that's held that as a consequence of our history,
Right.
really, going back and like, oh, here's this memory where you went like that, and then release that, and then the body releases it. We start to expand and we start to become lighter because every place where there's a constriction, there's a heaviness there. Well, like, oh, I really want to do this, but I don't have the energy. Well, why don't you have the energy? Because you're holding yourself in subconscious tension. And a lot of energy goes into that. In fact, people who have fibromyalgia, I've really discovered like what is the pain that they're feeling that moves around? It's the pain of holding yourself back all the time.
Wow.
Holding your needs, your wants, your emotions, your
Mhm.
authentic self, usually because of safety issues in childhood. Like you weren't safe expressing yourself. And so you ended up learning how to hold it all in. Well, we're mighty beings. We're very powerful. We're very strong. And it takes a tremendous amount of energy to hold ourselves back and in. And it's a huge relief and a lightening to be able to let these bands of tension go. So, on a very fundamental level, all we're really helping you to do here is to relax, to breathe more freely, and then your body just takes care of itself.
Oh, wow. I love it. I love it. And you actually, which is incredible to me, not only did you create this map, which I refer to quite often, but you also developed your own tuning forks, which to me is pretty crazy. So what was wrong with the other tuning forks?
Uh,
What was the improvement that you did?
well, there's a couple different ways that we improve tuning forks. So one was that what I discovered is that the tuning forks that I was using weren't really able to stand up to the heavy distortion that they were ending up in. It was one thing when I was just doing it over the body, but when I was getting into like, the trauma of your father almost killing your mother and, like the
Right.
crazy heavy distortions that I was finding in some people's fields, the tuning fork was being stretched and asked to make sounds that it wasn't really designed to, as the manufacturer said. Um, and just like guitar strings wear out, like metal fatigue is a thing. And so what was happening was that my tuning forks were wearing out. They were just blowing from the strain that they were under. So I actually worked with my manufacturer, Medivibe, and I think it took us at least a year and a half where he made me a whole bunch of tuning forks out of different alloys and different gauges. And I worked with every single one of them. And the one that lasted the longest was the one that we ended up using. So my unweighted forks are forks from the Solfeggio series. I did not
Right.
create, yeah, I did not create the those numbers, but I'd been using them for a long time, and I found that I really liked them and that they were really useful. Like I don't do anything unless it's useful and it has outcomes. I'm pretty rigorous in my
Sure.
working with stuff, to make sure that this is real and it has a benefit and it's tangible and it's consistent from person to person. It's not just like my experience with it.
Right.
So the alloy that our unweighted forks are created with it just produces a superior sound. It rings longer, brighter, clearer, stronger, and it will handle the distortion better. Which doesn't mean that they don't wear out, because they do, but it just takes them a lot longer than
Mhm.
ordinary ones. And some people never have them wear out. In fact, I've been using the same 174 for a few years now, and it hasn't worn out on me. So, but back in the day when I was doing lots of sessions, and I don't really see clients so much anymore. I just started seeing a few people here and there. I stopped for like 4 or 5 years
Wow.
because I got just really busy teaching and then having a company that teaches people and sells tuning forks. There's just a lot to do.
Yeah.
Um, and I just couldn't be chained to my treatment table all day anymore. I also started doing group sessions, which, kind of helped to take the place of the fact that I wasn't available. So the alloy is something that we created, and then I started to create uh, weighted forks prototypes based on my own research. So I became really interested in the Schumann resonance and the fact that our bodies are electric and that they're always responding to this background electrical pulse that's in our atmosphere. So the weighted forks I created are based in the Schumann resonance, and the Schumann resonance is the Earth's background electrical pulse that's always going on, and it's around 7.83 hertz. And this is something that our pineal gland is always attuned to, and it's through the regularity of this background pulse that we adjust all of our circadian rhythms to. So it's super important that we're exposed to it. But if you live in a city, if you're around a lot of devices,
Mm.
you just don't get it as much, right? And you start to get kind of heavy and that's why you go forest bathing or to the beach or to a waterfall. And, that's because the air is ionized, it's more electric. You're tuning into this background frequency. And so it's just really good for us. And it's good. It helps quiet the brain waves out of beta and thinking down into a more alpha brainwave state. So the first prototype I created was the Schumann resonance 7.83 hertz times 8. I created a 62.64 hertz fork. And I started using it and I was really impressed by it because prior to that I'd been using a 128 weighted fork, which is sort of a standard one you get on Amazon for 12 bucks.
Yep.
But when I found the difference between the 128 and the 62.64, you know how some cats are like way cooler than other cats? You ever had a cool
Yes,
cat versus
yes,
like an
yeah,
ordinary cat? You know what I mean?
yeah.
So when I used this fork and I put it on the body, I felt like it had an intelligence in it. I felt like it kind of moved through the body and figured out where it needed to go. Whereas if I just put a 128 on the body, it was just like into that spot. And so after the first few times I was using it, I'm like, this is like the cool cat of tuning forks. Like it's
Yeah.
just got a lot more to it than just an ordinary, 128. So then I decided that I wanted to make a binaural beat that created the Schumann resonance. So for those of you who aren't familiar with binaural beats, your brain does this very cool thing. Whereas if you play one frequency in one ear and a different frequency in the other, your brain waves will become whatever the difference is between the two. So if we want to get your brain resonating with the Schumann resonance, we put the second fork I made, which is 54.81. It's the seventh harmonic. So we've got the seventh and eighth harmonic. The difference between the two is 7.83. So when I hold them on either side of the head, the brain immediately starts to entrain into that alpha,
That's
calm,
amazing.
relaxed. Yeah, super cool. And so you can use it on the body. So this is what I call the Schumann pair and super useful fork, pair of forks. And then I came up with another fork, the Sonic Slider,
Yeah,
which
I
I have
love mine. I
as
love
well.
mine.
Yeah.
Love
And
it.
this is 7.83 times 12. And I was with this fork, I created this fork purely out of vanity. Like I was getting older and not happy with the fact that I was looking older. And I'm not the kind of person to get Botox or anything like that. It's just, I find that I do better when I'm not exposed to anything involving better living through chemistry. I'm
Mhm.
more interested in
Agreed.
better living through harmony. Uh,
Hmm.
and so this was created to use to kind of like iron your face with, basically,
Hmm.
to kind of smooth
Hmm.
out and lengthen the neck and
I love mine. Love
yeah.
it.
So that was what I originally created it for. And so much of like how you feel is in your face, right? Like I remember I was going to school full time and working and my kids were young and I can remember coming home one day from school and my face was all scrunched up and I was like, oh, I'm so old and tired.
Yeah.
And I got out my tuning forks and I just started to like iron my face and I was like, wow, I feel better when
Yeah,
I'm
the
not
neck.
all
Yeah.
scrunched up. Yeah. So that was the original intention. But then I started using it on my body a few months after I started using it on my face. And this is just the prototype. Um, and sliding the handle on my body uh, firmly and up the legs, across the belly, all of that. Now, I'm an outlier, but I went from a size 8 to a size like a medium to an extra small in just like 2 months. Like I went whoop, and my husband said, my wife went through menopause and suddenly developed the body of a teenager
So
syndrome.
that's
I was like, "Yeah, right."
interesting.
But that's what happened to me. And because I wasn't holding weight emotionally. I'd done a whole bunch of emotional clearing through receiving tuning. I didn't overeat. In fact, whenever I was with my skinny girlfriends, they were always finishing my food. But I had a lot of trauma in childhood that made me tense up a lot. And so what was going on in my body was that I had fascia binding. And I had all of these areas where fascia was bunched up and not allowing for fluid transfer to take place. And so the process of basically ironing my body with this vibrating tuning fork, it made me come all out in bruises as the fascia knots released. And all of this excess fluid that I was carrying around, I had some night sweats, I peed a lot, and all of a sudden I was just so much smaller.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And not that, like I said, that doesn't happen to everybody. I wish it did. It'd be so cool.
Right. Well,
But it doesn't.
everybody is different.
Everybody is different. Everybody holds weight in different places for different reasons. There's definitely been a number of people who have lost weight who notice they become more toned, more sculpted. It's definitely the key with the sonic slider is consistency. Like you really have to use it every day in order to really start to notice your body and your mood changing. But and it doesn't take a lot, like 10 minutes a day. It's that
Right.
consistency that's super key. So that was the sort of original prescription. But over the years that it's been out there, people are like, I've gotten rid of migraines, I've gotten rid of headaches, I've gotten rid of TMJ, my
Hmm.
digestion is better and stronger. I've gotten rid of moles and spots. I've gotten rid of period cramps. I've gotten rid of low back pain. I'm helping my autistic child by using it on their feet, and they're really just loving it, and they love using it on me. And so
Hmm.
we found that it's like the Swiss Army knife of forks in that it has so many different uses that people are finding. And everybody says the same thing. It's like, I love my sonic slider. Like, I wish I had a nickel.
I know.
Every time I've heard that phrase, just because it's comforting, it's rejuvenating, it's relaxing, it's sort of multi-useful. People keep it next to their bed. If they wake up in the middle of the night, they put it on them.
Love it. Hmm.
Yeah, there's just a lot you can do with it.
That's amazing. And I know, and we talked about this before I started the interview, but this summer you had something happen to you, and you were using your instruments on yourself for your own healing. And there's nothing like working on yourself
Yeah.
and really going like, wow, this like is incredible, right?
Yeah, and I'm not an accident prone person. So I've never in all the years that I've been working with tuning forks, I've never really had the opportunity to use them on myself in like a rehabilitative kind of way.
Right.
Um, July 2nd, so just a little over 5 weeks ago, I was in a motorcycle accident, and it was kind of a weird day. I had some weird things happen around it. One was when I'd been at the gym that morning, it was a Saturday, I noticed that the back of my left knee felt kind of edema-y and a little sore, which was weird because my left knee never feels that way. And I also noticed that I could only do 5 one-legged squats on my left side, even though I can usually do 15 or 20. And I was like, what's going on with my left ankle and my left knee? But then just a few hours later, I was in a motorcycle accident. I was riding the motorcycle. I was going along a straightaway. Now I'm 53. I've been riding motorcycles on and off since I was 25. So 28 years I've been on motorcycles and never had an accident. But in this particular day, I was going along straight, and all of a sudden my bike just started tracking to the side of the road, and I couldn't stop it. And I don't even really know what happened or why. I was like, all of a sudden, I'm just like, whoa, here I am heading towards the ditch. And so when I got over the gravel, I hit the front brake too hard and too fast because there was a lot of traffic, and it made me really nervous.
Right.
I ended up going down on my left side pretty hard, disengaging from the bike, and then rolling like 40 feet down the asphalt and landing in a grassy ditch.
Oh my God.
And miraculously, the only thing that really got damaged on me was I fractured the outside of my left ankle and I skinned my left knee. And that was really it, which was very, very fortunate. But it was very interesting to me that it happened because as a provider, and I've worked with thousands of people over the years, I always observed that people would end up with injuries, even from accidents where you think it's like random, but they would end up with injuries wherever their field was the weakest. And I already knew that my left foot was like the weakest area on my body. And I've had trouble with my feet since I was born. Basically, I was thinking about this morning. When I was born, when my mom was pregnant with me, and she was 39, and the
Mhm.
doctors told her that I had Down syndrome
Oh,
when I was in utero, and that I only had one leg. And I was like, why the heck did they think I only had one leg? Well, it turns out when I was born that instead of being in the fetal position in utero, I'd been in the lotus position. And so my legs were really bowed when I was born. And with some kids, when that's the case, they put braces on them. But the doctor told my mother to massage my legs straight. And what I think my mom did was that she massaged my legs, but she didn't pull out through my feet. Like, have you ever gotten a massage where
yeah.
someone pulls down, but then they don't pull through
Mhm.
and you feel like you got energy like stuck somewhere? You know that
Right.
feeling?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that my mom kind of pulled a lot of energy into my feet, but didn't pull through. And so always, like since I was a little kid, like my feet have just been a little weird and not felt like they were attached properly. The left foot especially, and I ended up like I had a whole bunch of plantar's warts on it, which I got rid of when I first started getting tuned. It was one of the first things to go away. But any place in your body where you're kind of disconnected from your immune system, your consciousness, your organizing intelligence is also kind of disconnected from that area, right? Why we end up with pathologies in certain areas is like whatever part of you is supposed to be regulating that isn't getting access to it. And so the only health issue that I had, and I used to have a lot of health issues. I mean, before I started receiving tuning and understanding electric health, I had terrible digestion, like terrible gas, bloating, stomach aches, indigestion, heartburn. I had chronic mid back pain, low kidney energy, um, just irritability, a short fuse, just a kind of low level, just like ugh,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of
Yep.
kind of thing going on, despite my best efforts, to not be that way. Um, and and so I had through tuning gotten rid of everything, like really
You are not that person.
not that person anymore, like really very solid. I have awesome digestion. I'm really healthy. The only health issue I had was that I still had like this sort of scaly rash on the outside of my left foot. And it's clearly an indication that there's more work to do in that zone. And in the Biofield anatomy map, the left foot relates to being stuck or mired in a toxic situation. Well, so many of us grew up in toxic situations.
Mm.
And so what are you going to do? You're going to disassociate because what else are you going to do? Right?
Right. We don't have time for that.
We don't have time for that. Do you know that how diabetics tend to lose
Yeah.
feet? Mostly it's the left foot that diabetics lose, not the right one, which I find really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Because
Wow.
it's like, what? I'm not getting circulation down there, nothing, because I'm just not going there because my life is too painful. And the only way that I can handle it is to stay disconnected from that discomfort.
Wow.
Yeah. So even like in the very beginning, when I first started getting tuned in 2010, I started teaching the method to a group of, they were like clients and friends that pretty much bullied me into teaching a class. And so that was the first time, I'd been working for 14 years on other people and had never experienced it myself. And so when I first started getting tuned, I remember somebody in that class like listening to my left foot and it sounding so wonky. Everyone was like, Eileen, how can you appear so together and yet sound so terrible? And I was like, compartmentalization. Like, I'm really
Right.
good at it. I'm really good at compartmentalization. I've got this totally functional side, and then I've got this like broken, disconnected, wounded child behind some kind of wall that I'm like dragging along with me. Right? Are we all in
Yeah.
some way or another? I mean, that's why we come to healing is to
Mhm.
like find these parts of ourselves and restore them back into wholeness. So, so I'm not surprised that even with all the impact and all the rolling and everything I did, that the only place that really got damaged was the outside of the left foot where there already was an issue.
That's
And so what
amazing.
that did was it forced me to do the deeper work here, to actually like be like, okay, I'm going to get a bunch of tune-ups. I'm going to go really into whatever it is here that I've been avoiding. That, you know, because there's always more to do, right? I think that sometimes there's a
Right.
tendency that this always annoys me when people are like, oh, Eileen, you know, like you got it all together, or you're some guru, or we're going to elevate you. I'm like, stop. No, like there's still plenty to excavate, to learn, to grow, you know, like we're all very damaged for the most part at this point in this world because the world is damaged. And and then we come from generations of
Right.
trauma, right?
Hmm.
I mean, it's just it's everywhere. So we're not just healing our own trauma, we're healing our ancestors' trauma, we're healing our cultural trauma. We're healing maybe past life trauma if you
Hmm.
believe in that, right? There's a lot of heavy lifting to do here for all of us if that's what our job is, you know? If it's our job to do the deep healing in ourselves and to help others, then you know that, right? And you
Yeah.
show up. You're like, okay, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help clean up the mess. Because now we have the tools, we have the technology, we have the interconnectivity where we actually can collectively start to clean up the mess that is in the collective consciousness of humanity. Um,
Right.
and I'll be doing that till the day I die, you know? So there's nowhere to go, but there's more facets to polish, you know?
Right.
There's more expansive, you can expand more. You're still coming from the same center, but the more you heal and the more you liberate from these dark corners of your mind, the more of your own potential that you access.
Right.
So, you know, but I was also able to actually use the forks on my wounds and my injuries. And one of the rules that we have is don't use a sonic slider on a fresh fracture. I threw that
Right.
rule out the window because that was just kind of like, to me, that was common sense. But I found that I really wanted to use the sonic slider on my fracture. Not the first few days, but shortly thereafter, I started gently using it and healed very quickly. Like I was able to stand and walk, you know, into my kitchen to make coffee, just 2 weeks after the break, and
With no assistance.
with no assistance.
That's
I mean,
great.
I needed crutches to
Right.
go
Sure.
further, you know, but actually to be able to take actual steps. And then just this past Saturday, I went out dancing and actually danced for a couple hours. Like I couldn't believe it. So I healed up really, really well, very solidly, very quickly. My wound healed very quickly because I scraped my knee pretty bad. Using the forks, getting tuning. But I also used another device as well, this thing called an Itera Care wand that uses light frequencies as well. So basically, I use sound and light and really found that that just made everything heal very quickly. So it's just been an interesting experience, you know, to use it for my own trauma and find how helpful it is. Even when I started walking and I was walking a little awkwardly, I started getting like cramps in my calf and I'd get the sonic slider out and go in there and work them out. So it's just really, really useful self-care tool, you know,
Hmm.
not just for beauty and weight loss, but actually from helping you to recover from accident and injury as well.
Right. Right. That's beautiful. That's amazing. Yeah, I love my sonic slider. I use it because I have TMJ, and it just feels so good. And I like putting it over my heart, over my thymus, which is wonderful for me. So I'm so grateful that you have done all this work for me already. It's already done, and I can start sharing it, you know, with my family and everybody else, and my clients, and all that kind of good stuff.
Mhm.
So I know you have another event that you're going to go to in a little while. So I want to be respectful of your time. But Eileen, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me for this wonderful chat. And I wish you lots of luck and good health and getting better and better every day. And yeah, I thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. So, if people, I mean, you'll probably drop a link, right? But if
Yes.
people want to learn more, I have a YouTube channel that lots of videos on that and talking about
Lots.
forks and techniques and, just things I've learned. I've learned a lot about human nature by doing this work and seeing the patterns in our minds that we get stuck in and all the ways that we undermine ourselves. There's a lot here. And I try to share that in videos, so that's there. And then, um, I will say, Amy, are you learning biofield tuning? Are you
I mean,
just,
I'm just doing a little bit through your videos and through your book. Like I said before, right now I'm doing a different program, but I'm looking to add this as
yeah.
well.
Good. Well, it's such a rewarding practice to do. And I think, you doing it with your hands is great because we're electromagnetic and you can feel with your hands and you can move with your hands. We can certainly heal with our hands. But tuning forks add a whole other layer of information
You're
that
right.
makes it really interesting. Like for me, that has been the most kind of useful part of it all is how interesting it is and how much gets revealed and how much I learn. And then you've also got the power of physics. You've got resonance and entrainment, so it's like your hands plus.
I love it.
Yeah, and so it's helpful to people with things like pain, with anxiety, even just like stuckness, right? That's a whole big thing that so many of us struggle with. We're just going around in circles, right? Very often that left foot's got some kind of ball and chain or shackle on it, and we just go around in our own little stuck, kind of slightly toxic lives, really wanting to be free, but not realizing that we're actually bound in by our own fields.
Right.
And so being able to hear and understand what's going on with somebody and actually liberate them so they become unstuck and are able to be more creative and more free is super, super gratifying. So I've really enjoyed the education and the practice of it.
Yeah. Thank you so
And
much.
we have a training program. We have a certificate program where you can become a certified biofield tuning
I'm
practitioner.
pretty sure I'm going to be doing that next. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's a great thing to combine with modalities, right? So if you already got a few modalities and you throw this in the mix, it's just a really great addition to the toolbox. And we have a lot of people who are multimodal practitioners who love being able to pull out a fork and use that as part of the mix. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Eileen. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your summer. And I will be putting all of your information, as a link and all kinds of information underneath in the description. So thank you again, Eileen. And I wish everybody a fantastic day and see you next time.